Buster, aka Joseph Frank Keaton, is Charlie Chaplin's main rival in the fight for the title of the best silent film comedian.
Round 1. Fight!
No less respected by film critics, but alas, much less known to the modern audience. Keaton is famous for his refusal to smile, not only on the screen, but on any camera and in public as well. Like Chaplin, Keaton was not only one of the best directors and actors of his time, but also a writer, gag man, and even editor of all his films. In addition, Keaton took a place in the history of cinema by staging and performing incredible stunts, which still blow the imagination, and in which he didn't use any stunt doubles. Or did he? Sometimes, Keaton is mistakenly called the first stuntman. This profession originated almost simultaneously with the cinema itself, although at first, the stuntmen were just volunteers from the extras. The first known stuntman hired to perform a dangerous stunt in a movie was Frank Hanaway. He played a bandit who fell from a horse in the Great Train Robbery. The professional careers of stuntmen were short-lived. In about 5 years, they either were injured so that they could not work any further, or earned enough money to find a quieter business. Every year in Hollywood, several people died on the set, and hundreds were injured. So it's not surprising that Keaton became, apparently, the only one of the big movie stars of the 1920s who executed all of the stunts in his films himself. Buster started performing before he was 3, and by 5, he'd become a real star of the family comic Knockabout Act, in which his father threw the kid around the stage, into the scenery, and sometimes even into the audience. For the convenience of throwing, a handle was sewn to his jacket. By the age of 21, when Keaton got into cinema for the first time, such long-term training made him one of the most brilliant acrobats and athletes of the screen, and his natural fearlessness, along with amazing endurance, earned him a nickname from the employees of his own studio, which Buster was obviously proud of: the Little Iron Man. Baseball player Ernie Orsatti, who worked for Keaton as a prop man for many years, and whom the press sometimes called Buster's double, said in an interview, "I am not and never have been the double for Buster Keaton, because Buster never had a double. Keaton is the greatest stuntman in motion pictures today, and no stunt is too dangerous or too difficult for him to attempt." One of the best stuntmen in Hollywood, Harvey Perry, recalled,
"I don't believe I could have done them like he wanted them. He knew what he wanted. He just didn't slip and fall down. He'd do a lot of things before he fell down, you know? And you can't double a guy like that doing those things."
Keaton began his screen career in 1917 at the studio of the famous comedian Roscoe Arbuckle, and during his apprenticeship, he not only performed his own stunts, but was also often stuntman for others, replacing even girls in dangerous scenes. For example, in this shot, Buster flies out of the boat instead of Alice Mann. And here, he most likely makes a high dive instead of Alice Lake. Here, Buster jumps from a horse-drawn carriage to a horse instead of a coachman. And here, packed in pillows, he makes a risky fall from the slope instead of Roscoe himself. But Keaton performed much more complex and risky things after he got his own studio in 1920 and began to create independently. We tried to select 10 of the most impressive stunts with Buster's own comments about how they were made. Not all stunts turned out exactly as intended. The most spectacular scene from Keaton's first feature film, 3 Ages, arose because of an accident. We built the sets over the Broadway Tunnel, looking right down over Los Angeles. By getting cameras up and shooting past our set in the foreground with the street below, it looked like we were up in the air about 12 to 14 stories high. We actually had a net stretched from one wall to the other underneath the camera line, although it was about a 35-foot drop. I took the lid of a skylight and laid it over the edge of the roof to use as a springboard. I backed up, hit it, and tried to make it to the other side. I misjudged the spring of that board and I didn't make it. I later realized if I had made it, I would have broken the world's broad jump record. I hit flat up against that other set and fell to the net. But I hit hard enough that it jammed my knees a little bit and hips and elbows. I had to go home and stay in bed for about 3 days. Boys the next day went into the projecting room, saw the scene, got a thrill out of it. So they came back and told me about it. The best thing to do is put an awning on a window. A little small awning, just enough to break my fall. Well, it was the biggest laughing sequence in the picture. A scene from Keaton's second feature film, Our Hospitality, was filmed on the real rapids of the Truckee River in Nevada. But at first, it didn't promise any particular dangers. Gabori put a wire around the log, ran it about 60 feet, and anchored it tightly around a baseball bat. 3 men were holding that bat. The idea was to shoot this close up, while they keep me from getting swept away. Fine, we're shooting. Then the wire goes pop, and bang, the log and I are in the rapids, and off to hell we go. I'm hitting boulders with my hip bones and knees, and a couple I hit so hard on my chest that I go clear up out of the water and over. It starts to quiet down, and I think I've made it. And then suddenly, I'm in foam a foot deep. You don't breathe very well in foam, and you can't swim on top of it. It was a bend in the river that saved me. I grabbed some overhanging branches, pulled myself out. The first thing Keaton asked when he was found was whether the cameraman managed to film it. He demanded of them to shoot any incident that could happen on the set. So the real shots in which he's carried away by the stream were included in the finished film. The waterfall here looks so convincing that for a long time the scene was considered to be shot on location. In fact, the waterfall was built over the pool of a large studio next door to Keaton's one, along with a detailed miniature of a distant forest in the background to create perspective. In the shot where Buster catches Natalie, she is replaced by a dummy, and when he lets her go, by stuntman Harvey Perry, but there is nothing fake in the stunt itself. The set was built over a pool, and we put up 4 8-inch water pipes with big pumps to carry the water up from the pool. That fall was about 6 inches deep. A couple of times I swung out underneath and dropped upside down when I caught her. I had to go down to the doctor right there and then. They pumped out my ears and nostrils and drained me, because when a full volume of water comes down and hits you and you're upside down, then you really get it. I think I got it on the 3rd take. I missed the first 2, but the 3rd one, I got it. In Keaton's 3rd feature film, Sherlock Jr., there is a classic scene of riding a motorcycle handlebar, which has been copied by some of his contemporaries. I was to be riding the handlebars with a friend who was driving, when we hit a bump which knocks him off. I continue on through Los Angeles traffic, not knowing the driver has been spilled, but actually driving the motorcycle myself. It's a hell of a job. The control of the gas is on the handlebars for speed, but I've got no brakes. I got some beautiful spills, some beauties. One part of the scene showed me driving along a city street where laborers were digging a ditch and tossing out dirt. Ernie Orsatti threw a shovel of packed sawdust and hit me in the face, blinding me. I hit both cameras, breaking them to pieces, scattered the extras, and finally collided with an automobile, but was not seriously injured. Another scene from Sherlock Jr. became famous for causing Keaton the most serious injury of his career. However, he did not notice it. He wanted to descend from the roof of a train using a water tower spout. That volume of water hit me so hard, it just tore my hands loose from the rope and I fell. And when I fell, I lit on the track. My head fell right across the rail. I had a headache for a few hours. I went into Mildred Harris's house, Charlie Chaplin's first wife, and she gave me a couple of stiff drinks. During Prohibition, when you couldn't just stop any place to get a drink. So that numbed me enough that I woke up the following morning, my head was clear. And I never stopped working. But years later, I'm in the Veterans Hospital on Sawtell. The doctor calls me in and says, "When did you break your neck? Look at this x-ray. Callus has grown over the crack next to the top vertebrae. That looks like it could have been between 10 and 15 years ago." Well, that's luck. For his fourth feature film, The Navigator, Keaton wanted to use authentic underwater filming, which was rare in cinema in general and unique for a comedy. The idea had apparently come to him 2 years earlier. Since the mid-1910s, the Williamson brothers, inventors of the photosphere, had been filming underwater. But more often, studios resorted to less expensive and complex dry ways to create the illusion that something takes place underwater. Keaton was not satisfied with such tricks. At first, he tried to shoot the scenes in the city's public pool, deepening it to 20 feet, but it suddenly cracked, unable to withstand the weight of the water. Eventually, the scenes were filmed in Lake Tahoe, Nevada. The shooting was conducted at a depth of about 20 feet. Keaton himself went underwater in a 200-pound diving suit, and to ensure the viewer would not doubt it was really him, they made him a special helmet with a glass window that revealed his full face. The air was pumped to the suit through a hose from the platform, but this system was not so safe. We built this camera box out of planks for 2 cameras, with a big iron passage up to the top with a ladder. The water in Tahoe was so clear you could really see, but so cold that I could only stay down about 30 minutes at a time. As long as I could stay down, it'd go right through you. I was 1 month up there shooting that sequence. His fifth feature film, 7 Chances, was not Keaton's favorite at all. Despite the surreal chase through the streets of Los Angeles involving 500 brides. This was because his producer imposed the script on him. He only really loved the closing sequence with an avalanche of stones. I was coming down the side of the hill and there were some boulder rocks, and I hit one accidentally while sliding down that hill. I looked behind me, and here come 3 more boulder rocks about the size of bowling alley balls. I actually had to scram to get away from them. There was only the one scene, but at the preview, the audience sat up in their seats and they were ready. I said, "Oh, that's all we need." We built 1,500 rocks, starting from grapefruit size up to one that was 8 feet in diameter, weighing 400 pounds. We spotted one of those big barren mountains, took these rocks, and then I went up there and got started. At least I was working with paper mache, although by the time you built the framework, it weighs something. You could get hit with them all right. Well, I got into the middle of the rock chase, and it saved the picture for me. And that was an accident. It hadn't been framed. In his most famous, ambitious, and favorite movie, The General, Buster does something dangerous almost all the time. He shoots a ball from a real huge cannon into his cabin on the move, jumps through a burning bridge, and runs along trains as if along the street. But one stunt here is particularly impressive. Johnny Gray, seeing a stuck railroad tie blocking the way, pulls it right out from under the nose of a slowly approaching heavy locomotive, which would not be easy to stop if something went wrong. But as soon as he manages to more or less cope with one railroad tie, another one is immediately found on the tracks, and Johnny instantly knocks down the second tie using the first one. The stunt, however, has one secret. The ties in the movie are actually props. By enlarging the frame, we can see rivets on the tie. Buster weighed about 140 pounds, and a real wooden railroad tie about 200 pounds, so it would be a little difficult to use them for such a stunt. That one, where one railroad tie hits the other one of those where people started gasping instead of laughing. A one-take shot. But the most dangerous stunts required Buster not athletic or acrobatic skills, but nerves of steel and the ability to remain motionless. When Annabelle rejects Johnny Gray, he, totally devastated, sits down on the crankshaft of his locomotive, and then the train suddenly starts moving, driving into the tunnel with an absent-minded Johnny. I was running the engine myself all through the picture. I could handle that thing so well, I was stopping it on a dime. But when it came to this shot, I asked the engineer whether we could do it. He said, "There's only one danger. A fraction too much steam and the wheel spins. And if it spins, it will kill you then and there." We tried it 4 or 5 times, and in the end, the engineer was satisfied that he could handle it, so we went ahead and did it. Keaton's most dangerous and most famous stunt appears in his final independent film, Steamboat Bill Jr. The film is pumped with an epic scene of the destruction of the city by a hurricane, for which 6 aircraft engines were used, so powerful that one day they blew a truck into the river. During a hurricane, the facade of a building collapses on an unsuspecting Willie Canfield, so he only survives by a miracle. Keaton had already used this stunt in Roscoe Arbuckle's short film Backstage, in his own short film 1 Week, and in miniature in The Blacksmith. But never on such a truly deadly scale. The wooden facade, with a width and height of about 20 feet and weighing about 4,000 pounds, was fixed to the ground on hinges. We laid the framework down on the ground and built the window around me so that I had a clearance of 2 inches on each shoulder. The top missed my head by 2 inches, and the bottom my heels by 2 inches. We marked the ground out and drove big nails where my 2 heels were going to be. They put the front on, painted it, and made the jagged edge where it tore away from the building. 4 people on the roof simultaneously cut the rope, and the facade fell under the pressure of the wind and its own weight. Keaton's widow, Eleanor, said that right before the shooting, he was informed that his producer, Joe Skank, was closing his studio. I was mad at the time, or I would have never done the thing. 2 extra women on the sidelines fainted, cameramen turned their backs, and everybody on the set was frightened. But it was a great scene. So, are there any stunts in which Keaton was doubled? The only known one in his independent films occurred in college. After the protracted and expensive filming of The General, the movie had to be made quickly and thrifty. And although Buster himself was in excellent physical shape, in this frame, he is replaced by an understudy. There was only one occasion in which I used a double. That was when I hired Lee Barnes, the world's champion pole vaulter, to vault into a second-story window. I could not do the scene because I'm no pole vaulter, and I didn't want to spend months in training to do the stunt myself.
I tried it.
Although Buster did something similar in 3 Ages, but there, the stunt didn't require proper technique. In 1928, Keaton lost his studio and creative independence, and was forced to move to the Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer studio, where, as one of the highly paid stars, he was not allowed to do dangerous stunts. But even there, in the movie Baby Cyclone, Buster secretly performed for his friend Lou Cody, a risky fall from the stairs, receiving as much as $7.50 for it. Despite the real danger of his stunts, the only injury that put Keaton out of action for a long time was an ankle injury with a torn ligament on the set of The Electric House in 1921. Buster's long slap shoe got stuck between the steps, and he fell from the escalator to the studio floor from a height of about 10 feet, after which he spent more than a month in the hospital. Keaton safely lived to 70 years old and died in his bed from lung cancer. From a very early age, Buster smoked like a steam locomotive, several packs of cigarettes a day. However, he exercised and swam every day for the rest of his life, remaining in excellent physical shape, and at any age could perform acrobatic feats and risky falls. At the age of 69, Keaton starred in the Canadian short film The Railrodder. Despite chronic bronchitis, he himself came out of the cold waters of the autumn Atlantic take after take, when the whole crew was wrapped up in warm clothes in the wind, and stubbornly argued with director Gerald Potterton, defending the gag with a map he invented, which everyone considered too dangerous.
That is not dangerous, that's child's play, for the love almighty.
He would get angry if you told him that standing on 1 foot in a speeder crossing a bridge in the Canadian prairies, considering that the floor is slippery because of the previous scene, can be dangerous. It scared us because he was driving at a speed of about 30 miles per hour, struggling with the road map and strong wind. But he was Buster Keaton. And who the hell am I to tell him what to do?